Welcome back to State of the Commonwealth. We are just 2 days away from the primary election. There are 6 statewide elections to be decided this year. Joining us today, we have Trey Watson, the founder of Capital Reigns PR and former communications director for the Republican Party of Kentucky. Democrat Senate Minority Leader Morgan McGarvey from Louisville, Al Cross with the UK School of Journalism, and Dr. Stephen Voss, political science at UK. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
All right, we'll start off with the first question, and we'll start off with you, Mr. Watson. What are the issues that Kentuckians should be thinking about as they head to the polls on Tuesday?
They should be thinking about where we were 4 years ago and where we are today. Wages are up, jobs are at record numbers, unemployment at record low. There's a lot of discussion about things that have happened over the last year and a half. People need to look at the last 4 years and just how far we've come since we've got a governor who really goes out and sells the state. Governor Bevin has done an amazing job going out recruiting major businesses, major investments in the state, and we're on the upswing because of it.
Senator McGarvey.
You know, first of all, some of those haven't exactly worked out. Some of the jobs have been created supposedly by the Governor Brady Industries, the energy plant in Pikeville. They're not happening right now. I think what people need to think about is where's our education system? How is their health care? Where is our basic infrastructure? What are the things state government is supposed to be doing? That's what needs to be on people's minds, and I think they need to know that we need a change in Frankfort.
Mr. Cross.
I think voters need to think about how the pension issue finally gets resolved. We have a pension reform in effect that is doing good, but it's a bit tenuous, subject to market changes, needs some more shoring up, and you have to have a bipartisan leader who can make that happen, I think.
Well, Al stole my thunder. I was going to say the pension problems too. But I'll add to what Al said that we're lucky in that all of the major gubernatorial candidates are talking about the pension problems. You know, when you talk about retirement problems at the national level, they're running and hiding from Social Security and Medicare problems. We're being given different choices for how to deal with this crisis situation, and we're lucky in that way.
Was this also an issue that was talked about 4 years ago?
Oh, the governor, the current governor, made it the main issue of his campaign, and I think it very much helped elect him.
It was an interesting approach for a Republican politician to take.
Mm-hmm.
And we are still talking about having a special session. Is there any talk in Frankfort right now still?
Yeah, I think you're at a total stalemate on the special session in Frankfort right now, and this is where you do see a rift between the governor and the legislature. This is something we need to have a special session to take care of, because on July 1st, if we haven't done anything, then a lot of state agencies like these mental health agencies, rape crisis centers, some of our regional universities are going to be in a really bad spot. We need to help.
Well, Representative Nemes tweeted out, I think yesterday, or maybe the chamber tweeted out, that Representative Nemes said that they're closing in on enough votes and that there may be a special session the week after the primary, so that may be coming soon.
Now, you talk about this stalemate in Frankfort right now. Would a 4th year with Governor Bevin, if he is reelected, with this current state house and state senate, could that create some progress in the pension reforms?
I hope so. I think that that they're coming together more and more on how to address it, coming to agreement as they try things and they either get knocked down or deal with massive pushback. I think we're slowly taking things off the table. The problem is so big, and there's Republican, Democrat, Republican, Republican. There's just such broad disagreement on how to fix it. There shouldn't be any shock that there's there's some dissension, there's some disagreement on how to attack this thing because of the size of the problem and because of the overall impact on the state.
And if there is a Democrat that is able to unseat Governor Matt Bevin, first of all, who do you think has the best chance, and could that help unlock this stalemate?
Well, yes, I think it will help unlock the stalemate. I mean, the one thing I disagree with Trey on, I think the governor and the legislature's relationship is at an all-time low right now. I think that's demonstrably true. He called a special session in December. It was gavelled out 24 hours later. He said he was going to have a special session soon. It hasn't happened yet. The reason it hasn't happened is he doesn't have the votes for his bill yet. When you have 2 supermajorities, that's a bad sign. On the Democratic side, we were talking about this before we came on set, I would not be surprised if any of the 3 win on Tuesday night. What I can tell you is also all of the 3 will have a better relationship with the legislature than Governor Bevin has had.
Why do you believe that?
Because Governor Bevin, I think, doesn't view the legislature as something he wants to deal with. I'll put it in business terms. There are 138 members of the House and the Senate. That's a 138-member board of directors that the governor must deal with whether he wants to or not. He doesn't see it that way. I think he sees the governor as some type of, having some type of imperial power where it's his idea, it's a good idea, the legislature should just do it because he said so. That is not how Frankfurt works, and it's never how Frankfurt has worked.
Can it improve in the next 4 years?
I think so. I think Governor Bevin's still learning this process. He didn't come from a political background, didn't come from a legislative background. He came from a business background where he was an executive, and the people that worked underneath him worked for him. And we see the examples where the governor and the legislature are on the same page. They work great together. Economic development, reforming the foster care system. Those are examples where they work very well together. I think that there's got to be a learning curve inside the administration on getting over that hump on how to deal with it, not as an executive, but as executive branch and legislature versus business.
And how have the last 4 years gone in terms of how we do have 2 super majorities and a Republican governor, but still we do have this pension problem?
Well, when the governor angered the teachers, it cost him a lot of support among his fellow Republicans in the legislature. And the teachers may not have performed at the last election like they had hoped, but they will never forget what the governor said about them. And I expect they'll be working hard for any Democrat, and there'll be a lot of Republicans who will be Republican teachers who will be in that frame. And there's a lot of anti-Bevin Republicans who would vote for Rocky Adkins if he were the Democratic nominee. But his ability to really mount a campaign that could beat an incumbent governor is in doubt, as is the other 2, frankly.
Now, there was a fever pitch in Frankfurt last year and certainly earlier this year. We'll remember in November. There are still supermajorities in both houses. Can that change in November this year?
If change, you mean the teachers being mobilized, for sure, that's a group that can be called out at any time. I mean, politics have changed in just the last 10 years with the ability of an interest group to get a message out quickly over social media and electronics to move people to the Capitol. They may or may not remember, but that depends on what's going on in the halls of government and whether they're feeling provoked.
Are there any other statewide races that we should be keeping a close eye on right now? We do have the Secretary of State position open and also the Attorney General. We'll start off with you, Dr. Voss.
A fascinating development we've had here that's interesting people nationally is the way Attorney General Beshear has been able to use that constitutional office to serve as a foil against the governor. Usually we think of checks and balances. It's a governor against the legislature or the courts stepping in. We don't think of 2 members of the executive branch going after each other. But in this state, we have that possibility. And I think we've heard candidates, at least on the Democratic side, saying that they'd be interested in using other offices as a way to counterbalance Governor Bevin. So any of these statewide races could matter if a Democrat took it. The
Attorney General's office is very important, as Andy Beshear has proven, as Ben Chandler proved when he was a Democrat with Paul Patton. They were at odds. The campaigns being run in the Republican primary, though, are rather odd. Each candidate seems to be trying to convince voters that he is the closest one to President Trump. That has absolutely nothing to do with that election. It just shows the influence that the president has over the electorate, the daily news cycle. It's the best thing Governor Bevin has going for him in the fall election, aside from the good economy. The governor is the least popular governor of any state in his own state. And if he did not have Trump coming here to campaign for him more than once, I'm sure, he would not be the favorite, but he is.
I had something that, part of why this I'm close to Trump, or on the Democratic side, I'm the Bernie Sanders Democrat, part of why that type of campaigning has become so popular is because people have so little information. Most voters have so little information about elections these days.
And it's nationally dominated.
Yeah, and then as the media has been shrinking in terms of print media, in terms of local political news, people turn to what little branding they can, and that is the Trump brand, the Sanders brand, whatever people can use to help get across to the voters what they'll get if they buy them.
But I also think that what you're seeing in the Attorney General's race is the type of campaign you've seen for several election cycles now in northern Kentucky. And I think it's what happens as the state becomes more and more Republican. You're going to see that sort of partisan politics that for years and years was on the Democrat side, where the campaign was over after the Democratic primary. I think you're starting to see that swing on the Republican side, and I think this is the kind of beachhead for it.
I think that's premature. I think the governor is the least popular governor in the country, and for a reason. I think you'll have the teachers and other groups show up in a low turnout election, and he's vulnerable. He is very vulnerable. When the governor is vulnerable in an off-year election like this, the rest of the ticket is vulnerable as well.
With all due respect to the other Republican primary candidates, Matt Bevin is a heavy favorite. Yes or no, does he win re-election in November?
I think the state has gone so far red that I think all of his problems have moved him from a 20% win
yes
to a 5%
no,
win.
Yes or no, Mr. Watson?
No.
He's got the shortest odds of anybody, but it's not a certainty by any means.
I have no crystal ball. There's no scientific answer to that.
Okay, thank you all for joining us. We will be right back.